not just that, but the blatant lies that CNN was telling about it. When you had CNN and MSNBC and all these different cable news network shows calling it horse dewormer, when it was a drug that won the Nobel Prize for the inventor of it, is a drug that has had billions, literally billions of prescriptions filled. It's a drug that saved lives, a drug that's on the World Health Organization's list of essential medicines. And for them to have the gall and to have the sheer audacity to just out and out lie to people about what a medication is. And it's used on humans far more than it's used on horses. And that they were calling that horse dewormer to try to mock me because they knew that I was unvaccinated and I kicked COVID very quickly. And they did not want that narrative out there. And they were beholden to their handlers. They were beholden to the people that give them exorbitant amounts of money in advertising revenue. And they fucking followed in line and they all piled on and they lost a fuckload of credibility from it. I mean, if you look at the way people who saw that, how many people saw that and would go, oh my God, they're just lying. Yeah. They're just lying. Like, there's no excuse for that. You can't imagine a scenario where they really thought I was taking horse medication. You can't imagine a scenario where they thought that I couldn't get real people medication. You can't imagine it. I'm not poor. I'm not without resources. I'm not confused. I'm not without the recommendations of actual physicians. Like, none of that makes any sense. The idea that they could go on television and say, oh, this conspiracy theorist is taking horse dewormer. And that was the narrative, not, hey, how'd that guy get better so quick? Yeah. How is it 3 days after he got COVID, we shut the whole country down for this thing, and he looks fine? And then they changed my filter and turned me yellow on television. Like, they took the original video of me and ran it through a filter to make me look horrible. It's really, they did some wild shit. But that wild shit that they did cost them their credibility. I just don't think they understood the landscape when they were doing that.
I don't think they do at all. I think they took an extreme editorial perspective without realizing that's what they were doing. And I think that the entire mainstream culture has actually found itself on a kind of a peninsula, that where there is insignificant variety, in my view, between the two parties, which is why they're so willing to remain engaged in cultural war discourse and the conventional hot button topics in this country in particular around the pro-life, pro-choice and guns arguments. They're willing to remain in that territory because financially and economically they are ultimately aligned, that the most powerful interests in America are happy with either outcome. I think that what's happened in the media space is they've unwittingly found themselves in a place where there's a kind of that incompetence was afforded, that they're not used to being challenged, that the assumption was that you would be sunk by that narrative, that it was an insignificant new space. And obviously it was a massive miscalculation because they weren't watching what was happening. They weren't listening to the conversations with McCulloch and Malone and Weinstein, and that it is apolitical, and that also that in order to make themselves seem distinct from one another, they have amplified their small differences to the point where they don't recognize actually that isn't America anymore. That people like that, even when I was a kid, if someone was just like right wing, that's just like, oh, that's a right wing person. Like you've been your family around your table. I've read something about Tucker Carlson the other day, like, you know, because of the release of those January the 6th documents to Fox and to Tucker in particular. And it said far right journalist Tucker Carlson. If Tucker Carlson's not far right, he's like a normal right wing guy. Far right means marching and red, white, and black flags.
I've seen me written as far right.
Far right.
They've like, described me as far right.
Tattoos on the face. Yeah. Extreme boots. You know, like, far right's not just like, oh, I believe in Christianity and like, stuff like that. So the rhetoric has become hysterical. And the horse medicine was the same. They had the option of saying, look, we don't know, that there's no evidence as yet that ivermectin is effective in these spaces because no one's trialling it, because there's no money in it, because science is a subset of big pharma and the economic imperatives the right thing. No one's doing experiments into natural immunity because natural immunity is not profitable. No one's doing those experiments are not being underwritten written. There's no clinical trials for that because no one wants that data for vitamin D or for steroids or for all of the things that came out as ultimately effective once the profits have been gleaned. And then how can you expect to maintain the authority? How can you expect to sit behind those logos of CNN and MSNBC and claim that kind of piety and certainty? And the way that they were like outraged by it was astonishing, like a kind of a how dare you have this credibility, how dare people listen to you. And I think that it's precisely because of a willingness to listen one day to a left-wing person, a right-wing person, some people with some crazy theories, some people talking about Egypt, some people talking about MMA. That's how people are now. People don't want that kind of centralized authority. It's over because of the way that technology has afforded people access to a variety of news sources, and a counter-narrative for any story can emerge almost at the same speed as the narrative. So now the price of authority is legitimacy. Authority has to be legit. And you can't, like, the same way as they did that horsewormer stuff with you. Like, if you watch Biden in Poland, he said, like, this speech is along the lines of, Putin thought that Ukraine would roll over. Putin didn't know how brave Ukrainian people are. He is a tyrant. And of course Ukrainian people are brave. Of course it's disgusting that there's suffering under this military invasion. But there's, like, I could handle it, I think, if the president went, listen, we were involved in that coup in 2014. The kind of, even the sort of people that are, the diplomats that are involved in this are the same diplomats that are involved in stuff like Iraq and Afghanistan. BlackRock are going to profit subsequently from the rebuild of Ukraine. Russia have got their agenda. We've got our agenda. We believe our agenda is more in line with what most American citizens will benefit. But they can't actually say that because it isn't true, because that what they want is a unipolar hegemonic world, in the same way that CNN don't even consider that what they're saying is dangerous and harmful. And now we're at a point where it's sort of that their approach to it may have been counterproductive in the most basic medical ways, and they weren't able to have that conversation because of financial imperatives and because they're basically owned.
Well, they're a propaganda network.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really all they are. They're just a propaganda network.